Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really exciting webinar today that I'm sure all of you guys have been waiting for. We are going to be talking about LEED version 5. And as you guys have seen, there has been a lot of talk about LEED in the last year. We've gone through several public comment periods, and we've talked about what the changes were likely to be, but now we know what they are officially. And so that will be the topic today. And I am joined by Spencer Jarrett, who is an LCA and EPD consultant here at One Click LCA, and also is a bit of an expert on LEED and the changes coming in version 5. So thanks for joining me today, Spencer.
Yeah, thank you, Aileen, and thank all of you who are joining us as well.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right in. We are going to be talking about what's new in LEED version 5, what's changed from the past versions, and what you need to do to comply. So we will get right into it in just a moment. But before we start, and as people are sort of trickling in the next couple minutes, I'd love it if you could jump into the chat and let us know where you are joining us from. We are streaming this webinar in several different time zones. So we know we have people joining from all over. So I'd love to see what country you're from and even what city and state if you're joining in the US, or what city if you're up in Canada or anywhere else in the world as well. Now, today's webinar is obviously hosted by One Click LCA. If you are new here, if you've not attended one of our webinars in the past, I'll tell you a little bit about us. One Click LCA is the leading LCA software for construction and manufacturing. We have an easy to use LCA and EPD platform. We have all the world's data and integrations. So we have over 300,000 data sets for you to access for your lifecycle assessments. We integrate with over 20 different other softwares that you use, like Autodesk and Rhino, Grasshopper, and many more. We also provide compliance tools for over 80 global standards. So whether you're looking to get LEED certified, you need to comply with a local requirement, we very likely have the solution for you. And we have been powering the makers of a zero carbon future for over 20 years. So really happy to have you guys with us today. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Spencer to get us started on what's new in LEED version 5.
Thank you, Aileen. So first, I want to lay out sort of our map for this webinar today and what to expect. So first, we'll start with a 5-minute overview of LEED version 5 and spend about 10 more minutes a little bit more focused on the embodied carbon fundamentals before we get into the specifics of the MR credits that are driving sort of the embodied carbon prerequisites and new credits in version 5, particularly the new whole building LCA requirement. And then finally, I'll go through a consultant playbook, 5 practical steps that hopefully you can take into your everyday work to make sure that you're earning those new prerequisites and give you the ability to go after some of those new credits. And with that, we will get into our overview of version 5. So what's actually different? First is LEED's weighting. Basically, version 5 has shifted a lot of the credit weights towards decarbonization. So beyond operational energy, embodied carbon credits actually carry almost equal weight in version 5. I think this is a great thing because it's version 5 recognizing that over half of a building's impact is occurring before it's ever actually built or before anyone ever actually occupies the building. So that's a great step towards further decarbonization. And second, there are 7 brand new prerequisites and 8 new credits. So together, version 5 is baking in carbon equity and resilience into schematic design rather than sort of having some of those credits as an afterthought in some of the earlier versions. And finally, a big update is if you're going after platinum for any project, you're going to have to do a little bit more than earn many points. It now comes with a performance gatekeeper in the form of several credits, one specifying an all electric design and having 100% renewables, and at least a 20% reduction in the embodied carbon impact of the project. So those 3 things are required if you are striving for a platinum level certification. And this graphic really distills that shift in the philosophy of the credits. So previously, half of the design credits were allocated to energy and biophilic related credits. Version 5 is all for that, but a little bit more numbers focused when it comes to proving and showing the tons of carbon dioxide that you've taken off of the building's impact. So basically, you need to show the real world carbon reductions in over 50% of the credits to really document how you have minimized the environmental impact of the project. So the 7 new prerequisites, let's break those out just for a second. So 3 of them are in the IP category, so the integrated process. 2 are in materials and resources, which we'll focus on here in just a minute. And then 2 more are in the energy and atmosphere category, plus a trio of consolidated credits in water, site, and EQ. And on the credit side, beyond the prerequisites that we just reviewed, there are 8 new opportunities that are, again, focused more on decarbonization and social equity supply chains. So for most of you that have actually done a bit of research as version 5 has been published now, you'll probably be most surprised not by the new credits, but by the new prerequisites. So let's take a quick look at those platinum gatekeepers I mentioned earlier. All electric design in the LEED guidelines means primary HVAC, domestic hot water, and cooking appliances and equipment must be electric. And emergency generators right now in version 5 are exempt, but they do need to be metered. So if they are ever turned on or activated, you can tell what power draw you have pulled from them. And 100% of the renewable energy can be done on site or off site if you have project specific PPAs in place to bring that power to the site, or you can use legally binding community solar shares. So pretty flexible in terms of what it means to have 100% renewable energy. You can have it on the site, or you can purchase it from near or far, as long as it's originating from renewable energy systems. And finally, the 20% embodied carbon cut references your own baseline LCA. So that means a poor baseline is kind of like a bad handicap in golf. It just makes the target higher. harder, I should say. Okay, so version 5 is also shifting a bit more towards transparency rather than performance. So version 4.1 for having EPDs on or documenting the materials on your project, you could get points just for simply having the EPD, even if maybe the products that were being represented in that EPD were not the best from an environmental impact standpoint. You could get points just for having them. Version 5 is a little bit different. Now you need to document quantifiable improvements. So lower GWP values in those EPDs, reduced toxic exposure, and higher recycled content are some of the metrics that you actually need to be looking at for the MR credits. And it's less of a just having the information to get you those points. You need to show how you have thoughtfully chosen better materials, or at least done those comparisons to choose the best options that you have available. So it's more of a shift away from show me what the impact is, and more of a show me how you shaved tons of carbon dioxide off of what the impact would typically be. Went a bit too far. So before we get into the prerequisites and the new credits, just a quick refresher for maybe some of you who are just venturing into the LCA and embodied carbon world because of version 5. Let's just do a recap of what is embodied carbon. So when we talk about embodied carbon, we're talking about the GHG emissions that are produced as a result of making a building material, all the way from harvesting of the natural resources that actually go into the material, all the way through its manufacturing, bringing it to the project site, installing it, and then the entire lifetime of the building, any maintenance, repairs, or refurbishments that need to be done for that material. And then finally, disposal or reuse at the end of that material's life. So that's what we're referring to when we say embodied carbon. Okay.
Spencer,
yes.
I just want to jump in here real quick and remind everyone in the audience, you know, great overview. You've gotten a little taste, but we're going to get into it in just a few minutes. If you have questions, if anything comes up that you're unsure of, drop any questions you have in the chat or the questions tab. We'll be monitoring that. So we will be answering your questions live. So please feel free to ask those questions as they come up.
Thanks, Aileen. Yes, please send your questions in. We'd love to see what your thoughts are or see if we can help. All right, so let's get into the details now about those prerequisites and credits. The prerequisite is basically your new cost of entry to even get the LEED certification. And let's get into what those look like. So this table here is showing you what all these new prerequisites are, the category, their names, and what the intent is and how it compares to the previous version, if there even was a previous version of this credit. So first, the IP credit prerequisite now bundles 3 different analyses. One, a climate risk to study the acute hazards, heat waves, floods, wildfires, things like that, that are local and relevant to your project site. 2 is exploring the human impact assessment that touches equity, displacement risk, and community health outcomes. And 3, a whole building carbon assessment before schematic design, really focusing on the structural components at that point. So as you can see, even the IP credit has an embodied carbon element to it that will have to be considered to even have the project certified. Next, in the materials and resources category, the quantify and assess embodied carbon credits basically requires you to do a whole building LCA. More of an embodied carbon assessment is maybe what I would call it, just focusing on the stages A1 to A3. So of all the materials on your site, what were the impacts to actually harvest those natural resources and manufacture the material before it's sent to your project site. And it's also a little bit of an expansion on the materials that need to be considered in that. So the previous version was more focused on the substructure, superstructure, and shell of the buildings. Version 5 is also asking you to look at exterior hardscapes as well. So those were previously excluded. So all of your pavers, tiles, anything like that that's outside the building will need to be included there. And then the next MR prereq is a zero waste operations plan. So basically, this is mandating a physical space and a documented route for recyclables, for organic materials that are on site, for batteries, lamps, and other e-waste. And the language is pretty strict. All of those must be included in the plan. And there needs to be a physical location and route in place that you are going to use throughout the construction of the project. And then there's two more EA prerequisites. One is the minimum energy performance baseline is moving to the newer ASHRAE 90.1 standard. So no longer using the 2019 standard and looking more at the ASHRAE 90.1 2022 standard. And you also must file what LEED is calling an operational carbon plan, outlining basically how you will reach zero carbon operations. And lastly, refrigerants exceeding a GWP value of 700 need an alternative analysis, and for the commissioning needs to have details and testing as to how the leakages will be detected, monitored, and addressed. And higher GWP refrigerant options like R410A are effectively phased out with the version 5 update. So that's a quick overview on the new prerequisites. The top three there involve some level of embodied carbon assessment for the materials in terms of specifying them or in terms of how they are dealt with on site for recyclability or reuse. So now let's get into the MR category more specifically. So most of you that did LEED projects under 4.1 have probably realized that the MR category could almost be ignored for the most part a lot of times in the past. And if you didn't ignore it and you were going for those credits, the most that you could get was 8 points. Now with version 5, you can get many more points. And then we do have the new prerequisite actually requiring some level of embodied carbon assessment for any new projects. 6 points for the reduce embodied carbon credit, 2 for the low emitting materials credit, which is now nested within the MR category, 5 for building product selection and procurement, and then 2 for construction, demolition, and waste diversion. So you can hypothetically get almost a fifth of your entire credit scorecard from the MR category. So there's a lot more opportunity to gain more points, and it's also a requirement to do embodied carbon assessments to even have the project LEED certified at all. Okay, so this table breaks down sort of what the shift into embodied carbon optimization looks like. So product transparency consolidates 3 separate BPDO credits. Now you can earn points through a weighted star system that values the impact over the documentation or the paperwork, so to speak. And circularity is strengthened to move the building and materials reuse out of the shadow of the version 4.1 LCA credit, and allows you to earn up to 6 points in this new standalone credit. And in terms of the tools that are out there to go after this prerequisite and the other credits, One-Click LCA is an accepted software tool to do this. So in One-Click LCA, you can do the entire building LCA, or you can document the EPDs that you're using, since we have all of the EPDs that are out there. And then at the end, for the comparative baseline, to show how you've reduced that embodied carbon impact by 20% or more, you can do that in One-Click LCA as well. And we have an automated report that will document the overall differences between your baseline and the proposed or design case LCA, and then show how you met those reductions by using different materials, maybe different plants from a particular manufacturer, and outline what the hotspots were that you identified, so you could go after those and meet that 20% embodied carbon reduction. So let's unpack the first MR prereq. As I mentioned earlier, a little bit different than the 4.1 related credit in that it is requiring you to include the on-site hardscapes. So in this prerequisite, you need to assess the structure, superstructure, substructure, the enclosure of the building, and the on-site hardscape materials. So all of your foundations, slabs, columns, beams, exterior walls, parking lots, retaining walls, all of that needs to be considered in this prerequisite. Interiors are optional. And by the way, everything in this presentation is geared towards the building design and construction guidelines. There are similar changes in interior design and the operations and maintenance guidelines, but we're focusing on new building design, new building construction. So the deliverable for this prerequisite are twofold. One is to have the baseline GWP in kilograms of CO2e, or carbon dioxide equivalent, and provide a narrative of the top 5 hotspots. So that is one way where that automated report that I mentioned comes out of One-Click LCA. It will actually identify the top 5 hotspots. So you can find those pretty easily. And then you need to choose different materials, use less materials, or be more thoughtful about where the materials are coming from in order to meet that 20% reduction. And it also requires a level of job site carbon tracking. So tracking the fuel used on site, either for equipment or generators or whatever it may be, tracking how much fuel you used, how much was wasted. And that pretty much sums up what that prerequisite is. You need to take a hard look at the core and shell and exterior hardscapes, identify what the worst materials are from an environmental impact, and then choose alternative materials or methods to reduce the impact in order to achieve the prerequisite. Okay, so now we're on to the reduce embodied carbon credit. Part 1, the design optimization path awards 2 points for a 10% GWP cut, 4 for 20%, and 6 points if you can achieve a 30% reduction. So a good place to start is with the most carbon intensive materials. It's typically going to be your concrete or your steel. And in terms of what options are available to you, there'll be usually regional constraints in terms of the different mixes, different steel that you can procure for the project, but looking at things like using alternative binders in that concrete or using steel from a plant that has optimized its furnaces to be electric can go a long way with going after the low-hanging fruit, we'll say. But hitting the 30% reduction is going to be a little bit more difficult. It'll take a more holistic look at all of the materials, or maybe even using alternative materials to be able to meet that reduction. But it's important to remember that all of the reductions are weighed against your own baseline LCA. So your baseline LCA needs to be accurate, needs to represent reality, how you would typically construct that building in that region to be, code minimum construction. Those sorts of materials need to be represented in the baseline. So don't create a intentionally terrible baseline to improve from. It needs to be accurate, and then you can work backwards from there. All right, and in the same credit, there's part 2 here. So core and shell projects can capture an extra 2 points, a max of 8 points, either by going beyond the 30% reduction or by combining the LCA credit with the in-depth EPD analysis. So if you are doing a core and shell certification and you want to get those 8 points, if you do the EPD analysis, just keep in mind that at least 20 product-specific EPDs must be documented in that analysis, and you need to explain or provide a narrative demonstrating how that data from the EPDs informed your decision making. Okay, so there are some synergies in the MR category with other categories. The first one is with the energy and atmosphere category and the all electric and peak load reduction credit that is there. So you can really work these 2 credits together in terms of the materials that you're using, the building footprint, the thermal loads from where the building is situated to reduce both the operational and embodied carbon impacts sort of at the same time, or at least work them together. I mentioned earlier there is a IP, integrated process prerequisite for the carbon assessment, and that definitely feeds right into the other MR credits. So that prereq again requires you to do an early LCA before schematic design to sort of identify hotspots and work down from there. And I think that's really going to set everyone up nicely to go after these other MR credits. If you're already having to assess a lot of the materials and their A1 to A3 impacts, it just makes sense to go ahead and look at the rest of the lifetime of the building and other material categories to see how you can reduce some of that impact before you get too deep into design. And then there is a minimized site disturbance credit in the sustainable sites category that feeds into the MR mindset a little bit. So you could think about reusing existing building parts, maybe an existing slab, existing core and shell, whatever it may be, to show the carbon savings, so to speak. Instead of building a whole new slab, for example, you can show, how much of an environmental impact you're foregoing by using an existing part of a building. And then the last two that we'll highlight here, one's the water reuse credit in the water efficiency category. So if you look at some of the details of that credit, it has to do with capturing rainwater and reducing the water demand for the site. So this feeds in nicely to the MR mindset as well, because you have more impermeable surfaces on the site. Typically, that's your concrete, that is the asphalt in the parking lot. By cutting out some of those materials, you'll not only reduce the embodied carbon impact, but you'll be able to actually use some of that water that's hitting the site from storms that come along, rather than all of it being, taken away by the stormwater system. And then lastly, the low emitting materials credit in the indoor EQ category. This was already counted under the optimized products credit, but now it will also satisfy the low VOC baseline. So sort of looking at some of the same data there for those two credits. So it would make sense to maybe consider pairing that with some of these other MR credits that are related. Okay, sort of in summary here, I just want to leave five steps, we'll say, that you could maybe implement into your playbook as you're advising or consulting or designing for LEED projects. The first one is a basic one that should be hopefully being done anyways, but that's to organize an integrated kickoff workshop at or before 20% of your design is baked at that point. That's going to be critical to actually meeting the new prerequisite to reduce your embodied carbon impact by at least 20%. Once you get too far into design, that 20% is going to become more and more difficult to actually achieve. So the second thing you can do is go ahead and start reaching out to suppliers, to manufacturers that are going to be specified on the project, and start asking them for EPDs. In order to gain most of these MR credits, the EPDs are going to be critical to actually doing that. And same thing for the prerequisite. Having those EPDs in hand, or at least for the ones that don't have EPDs yet, letting those manufacturers know that you work with that it's required now, or it would really go a long way with helping you get your project LEED certified, will help them and help you get that project certified. And the third thing is to target high star products. So there's a lot of overlap between the EPDs, HPDs, and recycled content. So it just makes sense to tackle all of those at once. You can get more points. You can reduce the impact through those synergies, and definitely an easy place to start if you want to earn as many credits as you can. So the fourth thing is to coordinate with the GC on the project with the addition of requirements to track the on-site fuel usage and to document the products that are actually being installed on that project. You're going to need to coordinate with the general contractor in order to track those metrics, but hopefully find ways to reduce the impact on the site. Next, we could document the reuse. So we talked about this on the last couple of slides, but reusing any materials that are already on the site, if possible, and for those materials that are being taken off site, that are either being demolished or are being wasted through the building process, documenting where you're going to organize those materials for recycling, for disposal, and then what your plan is to actually make sure that that occurs as they're being taken off site. And then the last thing you can do is feed some of your LCA deltas into your energy model iterations. So this goes back to some of those synergies that we talked about at the beginning. If you are looking at the building really as a system rather than, going after strictly the points, you can probably find a lot more savings from both an operational and embodied carbon standpoint. So using the LCAs in tandem with your energy models, considering different materials, maybe different orientations, different thermal masses, to reduce them both at once would probably be a great place to start. So just some last second takeaways. Probably some key points to remember out of all the information that we've gone through. The first is that embodied carbon assessment is now mandatory. You're at least going to have to look at the A1 through A3 impacts of the core and shell, of the exterior hardscapes, of the envelope. That's required. That's the price of entry to even be LEED certified. And then the product optimization updates replaces a lot of the paperwork. So V5 is more focused on the actual impact rather than just having a document that says the impact. V5 is looking more at explaining and providing your thought process as to how you reduce the embodied carbon impact using those EPDs or other documentation. The third is that you can combine a lot of these credits together to really design efficiently, but also reduce the environmental impacts kind of in one fell swoop. We've gone through quite a few of those combinations and synergies, but keep that in mind as you're putting together your credit budget. And then lastly, go ahead and start reaching out to your manufacturers, to your suppliers, to get some of that data from them. Hopefully they have EPDs so that you can earn the prerequisite, earn the credits. But if not, now is a great time to go ahead and let them know that that is the information you'll need going forward.
Thank you, Spencer, for that great overview. A lot of great information. I hope that you guys in the audience got a lot of your questions answered. I definitely learned a lot. And now we want to offer our services to you. There's a lot of life cycle assessment needs in LEED v5, as Spencer went over. There are needs for early design to create your baseline, doing life cycle assessments, and citing which EPDs you're using. And we have all of the tools for that. So if you would like to know more about One-Click LCA solutions, see if they're right for you, then click yes on the poll that is popping up on your screen right now. If you click yes, someone from One-Click LCA will reach out to you. We'll schedule a free consultation to find out what your needs are and if our solutions are a good fit for you. So please click yes if you'd like to schedule a demo with a LEED expert. And if you're not ready to schedule a demo yet today, you can click not now and you can learn more at oneclicklca.com. And I also want to invite you all to the Summer Sustainability Summit that is happening next week. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. So if you want to join us for that, we have 3 different sessions. We are broadcasting across multiple time zones. We have a lot of really great guests, and we are going to be talking about trends and the current state of sustainability in the built environment and the construction sector. So that's definitely an event you don't want to miss. It's the largest digital event for sustainable construction. And then I'm going to put this back up on the screen. You can use this link to contact Spencer if you like, but I'm also going to hand it back to him. And Spencer, do you have just any last thoughts, anything you want to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, just the main takeaway is that looking at embodied carbon is going to be required at some level. So the more that you can engage your manufacturers that you're specifying, the easier that will be to meet that prerequisite. But otherwise, thank you all for joining, and please reach out to me if you have any questions or want to talk about anything from this presentation.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Spencer. Thanks again for everyone for joining, and we will see you on the next webinar.